Thank you, Ashley. So I'll go over our mission again since the community of practice is new, but the mission at the Atlantic Canada Climate Network is to connect folks working on climate action within Atlantic Canada, to center justice, collaborate effectively, and leverage available resources and capacity efficiently as we reduce emissions and respond to climate change impacts. Addressing climate change is increasingly important to our health and our well-being. In addition to that health and well-being of our communities and our planet, over time, we've noticed that different organizations experience the same needs, barriers, successes, and so much more without a convenient and ongoing communication channel between our climate champions. So we're risking limiting ourselves to disjointed and incremental changes. Our goal is to reduce barriers and create collaboration across the Atlantic Canada. We aim to critique dominant ways of knowing, thinking, and doing, and bring new perspectives, engagement, methodologies, voices, worldviews, and opportunities for education to all Atlantic Canadians. And before we begin, we also want to respectively recognize and acknowledge the relationship that the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis across Canada have with the land and all Canadians live on and enjoy. We want to recognize that the ACCN operates on the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki nations, or the Wabanaki Confederacy, as well as the Innu and Inuit people. We are in Mi'kmaq territory of the Mi'kmaq, comprising present-day Nova Scotia, PEI, and parts of Quebec and New Brunswick, Newfoundland, and Maine. The Mi'kmaq have been connected to this land and these waters for thousands of years and continue to be so in the present. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which these nations first signed with the British Crown in 1726. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of land and resources, but in fact established the rules of what was to be ongoing relationship between the nations. In the spirit of peace and friendship, I greet you all today. It also reminds us that each of the 634 different nations, communities, 53 Inuit communities, and 8 Métis settlements have a unique historical, cultural, spiritual, and environmentally sustainable connection to the land and their people and ancestors have inhabited since time immemorial. We encourage all Canadians and visitors to these lands to learn about and regularly acknowledge the historic and current relationships that exist between the unceded land on which we live and work and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also encourage all Canadians to consider how they can personally contribute to Canada's reconciliation with Indigenous people. And I know a lot of people last month also joined us from across Canada, so feel free to search up nativeland.ca and you can see which treaties and First Nations communities you're joining us from today. And I think Ashley dropped the link for our meeting agenda today so that we all have a little idea of what we're going to be chatting about. And now it's October. I always love seeing all the different colored leaves on the trees, although they're starting to fall after the strong winds. Our topic for today is building resilient communities. And with such a small group, I think we'd like to take the chance to do a little round table and introduce ourselves as well. So the first person I see is Andrew.
Sorry, I had to find my unmute button. So hi, I'm Andrew McKenzie. I'm an Environmental Health and Safety Director with RPS Composites Inc., or Industrial Group, sorry. And of course, I've been a member of the ACCN for how long have I been part, Ash? By a year and change?
Since we started, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So I was trained up by Al Gore but in 2020 for the Climate Reality Leadership Corps then. And of course, at the time I was working United States, Canada, Mexico, South America. So I was working all these regions. So I was like, involved in a lot of different things, including zero waste to landfill, which I'm embarking on now with the company I'm working with, among other things. And of course, I was as part of the ACCN team. I was also part of the start of the Innovation Speaker Series. Sorry, I had to spell that one off. I haven't used it in a while. But yeah, that's me.
You got to popcorn it to somebody else now, Andrew.
Oh, I'm going to circle it back to Amanda. Let her decide.
All right, well, I'm just gonna go in order and it's random based off of however Zoom suits it, but I also see Jenna next.
Hi, thanks for letting me join you today. My name is Jenna Miller, and I'm here, as you'll see on the agenda, that I'm presenting later, and that's why I attended today. But I work with CLIMAtlantic, which I will introduce later on. But I also am in a shared position where I work also with New Brunswick's provincial government and the Department of Environment and Local Government on the Climate Change Secretariat, and I work specifically on climate change adaptation. Do you want me to popcorn it? Sorry.
Sure, yes, Jenna.
Sure. Kira, are you able to go?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kira. I am working with the Oath Project. It's a organization that was originally based in Halifax. Now we're doing work in Halifax again, but we've also done a lot of online campaign type stuff and education. I recently moved to Nova Scotia from Ontario, like many other people. Yeah, I did environmental sciences studies in school, and I'm currently working in the environmental field, and I'm excited to meet all of you.
Thanks, Kira. Vikram, you want to go next?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Vikram. I've met some of you before. I moved to the Atlantic region pretty recently, like a couple of weeks ago, after doing my master's in Montreal. And I work in sustainability with a small firm called Bloom Funding in St. John. And I'm just looking to build my environmental network in New Brunswick and in Atlantic Canada. Nice to meet you all.
Vikram
Mel.
actually was our Innovation Speaker Series speaker last month. And they talked about New Metric, which is a wonderful ESG initiative that they do. It's a cool tool. I will drop the link to the YouTube video if you guys are interested. We're going to make Vikram famous.
No, I mean, I should have been plugging my own stuff, but I appreciate you doing it for me.
Thanks, Vikram and Ashley. Mel, are you able to introduce yourself?
For sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Mel. I met some of you guys last month. New faces. I'm excited to meet you as well. I currently work with Second Harvest, Canada's largest food rescue organization. I am the manager of food raising for all of Atlantic Canada. So I live in a small community on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia, but I work throughout Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, New Brunswick, and PEI. And since we met last month, I've been on trips to both Newfoundland and PEI, so really digging into things. I'm pretty new with Second Harvest. My background is all over the place. I've spent time working in environmental, both science and education, conservation. I worked in animal welfare for many years. And before joining on with Second Harvest, I was working with Youth Challenge International, I coordinated the Climate Futures Lab program that I brought to Halifax for the first time. And I also had the pleasure of spending 3 months in Tanzania, writing a climate strategy for YCI's Her Start program. So I've got background in a lot of different things and collaborations that I've made with many people on this screen right here already. And I look forward to growing these collaborations from a food rescue lens now as well. So thank you guys so much for having me, and it's good to see some familiar faces. I will pass it off to Nicole.
Awesome, thank you, Mel, and nice to meet you all. It's my first time in one of these meetings, so really eager to kind of feel what it's like to be in one of these meetings and like looking forward for the next ones. I'm Nicole, as you already see. I'm from Ecuador originally. I came to Halifax, Nova Scotia to do my master's. My background is in economics. Did my master's here on development economics. And right now, for almost a year, I've been working with Net Zero Atlantic as a research manager. And my main focus over there for Net Zero Atlantic, for those that are not familiar with the organization, is an energy research organization. So we focus a lot on the energy transition piece and doing research and collaborating with people around the country, but mainly the region, on these pieces that are really important to get of coal by 2030 for Nova Scotia and 2050 and so on. And because of my background, I'm not an engineer, or I don't have a background on environmental studies. I'm more on the behavioral piece of the transition. So I've led a project on behavioral interventions to promote pro-climate behaviors within the region. And that's going to wrap up next year. And yeah, happy to be here. I'm really looking forward to grow my network a little bit more on the climate change piece, and also to learn more about all your amazing work for the region and for the world, really.
Nicole, thank you for joining us. We actually had Net Zero Atlantic on our Innovation Speaker Series earlier this year. So if you guys would like to learn more about the geothermal potential of Nova Scotia, here's another link for you. This is just working out. I didn't plan this, I swear. Shatangshu, would you like to introduce yourself?
For sure. Yeah, it's so nice to see so many of you again and see so many new faces as well. So my name's Shatangshu. Wear a few different hats. So I relate to you, Mel, there. Currently working, I'm actually in Bangladesh right now. I work with the Aga Khan Foundation, looking at clean energy projects and some work there. So my other home, but also I'm very proud to contribute home as well. Where I think Kira may have shared a bit already about the old project, some of the work we're doing around ecosystem mapping for HRM. And yeah, I think it's been really wonderful. Was kind of more involved with ACCN back in the day, the old project, and was one of the partners who like tried to get us all going. Thanks to some really incredible staff who took leadership of that, and then seeing this continue actually is so incredible. Seeing these amazing innovation speakers are so like it's just so wonderful to be here. So I'm just excited to. I just want to like kind of check in. Timing has sometimes been tough, as you can imagine, working abroad to kind of make some of these things work. But I was available today, and I was just like, hey, you know what? I've been trying to get to one of these for a while, so let's make it happen. So really nice to see everyone. Thank you, Ashley, and everyone else as well. So yeah, great to see everyone.
Thank you for joining us. It's really nice to see you, Shatangshu. If it wasn't for the Oath Project, the ACCN definitely wouldn't exist. Lots of gratitude for all of our collaborative work, and hope to see you back here sometime in the future. I swear every time we catch up, you're somewhere else. So you and Mel have a lot in common and should probably swap some really great travel stories. I see great conversations in your future.
I think the last time Shatangshu and I had a conversation, he was like waiting to jump on a bus and I was sitting in a room in Zanzibar. So yeah, I don't know if we've ever had a chat when we've been in the same time zone.
I think the last time I talked to him, he was in Peru, was it, when I talked to you last?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's been Peru. And then I think you, Mel, like we talked when I was waiting for a bus and I was in the American side of Niagara Falls. And I was like, let me try and get there. And I made it back with literally a minute to spare. That was like a very risky move, but hey, it worked out. And yeah, anyways, it's been just really good. I'm very privileged to have flexible work which allows me to travel and whatnot. So yeah, and exciting work on climate issues as well. So, and I think a credit to ACCN for also some of that inspiration, because like the old project was a lot of volunteer stuff, and then that's been led to some professional opportunities. So really credit to everyone in the Halifax community and the Atlantic community for making a lot of stuff happen.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's always nice getting to know new faces, and I'm already getting some LinkedIn notifications from some of you. So I always love the networking and the connecting. The next point on the agenda is a quick recap of last meeting. I tried my best to really summarize it in a few sentences. So Ashley introduced the community of practice and that focus on fostering collaboration and setting goals for climate action in Atlantic Canada. We had our welcoming session, followed by some discussions on some current projects and challenges that everyone's facing, including environmental racism. And there's a link for an environmental racism course as well. Sustainability in small businesses. There also was a collaborative brainstorming session that included identifying some key issues with intercity transit challenges, volunteer opportunities for youth, and then, of course, the just broad theme of informal networking, which allowed everyone to connect and share some resources. And I think that meeting concluded with some action planning and outlining some items in for the agenda this week. So without further ado, we can jump into our sharing on our learning session with our member-led presentation from Jenna.
Thank you. Sorry, just let me share my screen here. Are you seeing it full screen?
It's not in presentation mode, so we see the whole screen with all of the slides on the side.
That's
but it's
weird because I just
beautiful
clicked
colors.
I clicked presentation mode and it's oh, this is so embarrassing when it's being recorded.
Oh no, it's all good. If I were you, I would exit out of the share and then
Yeah.
reshare and then just share a single screen and look for that presentation screen. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
It looks the same, but we could still go through
Yeah.
forward if this is the easiest way for you to do it. I wouldn't worry too much, Jenna.
Why is it doing this? I'm sorry, I'm just gonna stop for a second again. All right, so I'm going to talk to you a bit about CLIMAtlantic today. So CLIMAtlantic is a climate services hub for Atlantic Canada specifically. It was created back in 2021, and it's created through a partnership between Environment and Climate Change Canada and all 4 provincial governments in Atlantic Canada. And overall, our mandate at CLIMAtlantic is to provide free and publicly accessible support for all types of organizations and individuals to help consider climate change impacts in their decisions. We focus on the adaptation side of climate change and really try to support access to data and information to support decision making. And we're also part of a network of climate service organizations across Canada. So if you're not located in Atlantic Canada, they're all under the umbrella of the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. There's the Pacific Climate Impacts Consortium in BC, Climate West that covers the Prairie provinces, Orca in Ontario, and Uranus in Quebec. CLIMAtlantic has a team that's currently 16 people, will be 17 starting next week or later this month, spread out across Atlantic Canada. The way that it's laid out, so my position with CLIMAtlantic is as the New Brunswick Provincial Climate Services Specialist, and we have an equivalent to my position in the other provinces as well that are also have a shared role between different organizations, and then the rest of the staff is all working for CLIMAtlantic only. But all this, our bios and stuff are available on our websites, and if you're in one of the provinces other than New Brunswick and you want to get connected with the provincial climate services specialist there, you can contact them directly or contact anyone really at CLIMAtlantic, and we can point you in the right direction if you have any questions. But basically, we try to do service delivery, and we'll help people one-on-one or do like engagement and presentation type things like this. So going through the different services that we offer, one of our main things is to help people understand and access climate data, whether that's historical data or future projections, and understand different projection scenarios, how they're created, and kind of what they should be considering in decision making. We, as under the Canadian Centre for Climate Services, they run climatedata.ca. So we are partnered with climatedata.ca as the main organization that we show climate data from, but we can also help access climate data from other portals as well. And yeah, we can offer training to people on how to use data portals if that's what they're having difficulty with. We can find data for them and tailor it to their needs, and just offer guidance on how they can consider data in what they're using or working on. Something else that we really try to do, something kind of like this community of practice from the ACCN, is foster networking across Atlantic Canada for people who work on climate adaptation specifically. And one way that we do that is through a tool that we have on our website called our networking map. It currently has over 200 pins, and you'd all be welcome to add yourselves to it if you'd like. But it's a resource that you can use to find people or organizations that work on different facets of climate adaptation, or to help find out who works on the kind of things that you're interested in. So you can filter within the map by different specializations, location, sector, and that kind of thing, to try to find people who work on similar things to you, or if you're looking for somebody to collaborate with. And also in terms of networking, we run or are part of provincial community of practices for climate adaptation. So in New Brunswick, there was already the existing climate change adaptation collaborative that's run by the New Brunswick Environmental Network. So CLIMAtlantic has a position on the steering committee of that organization and will help with their annual conference and getting the word out on different things that are happening across Atlantic Canada. And CLIMAtlantic has created community of practices for climate adaptation in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, and PEI. And they all look a bit different depending on the province, but depending on where you're located, if you're in Atlantic Canada, you're welcome to join any of those. So another tool that we have on our website is our adaptation library. So in helping to facilitate people's access to climate change resources, within this library, there's over 400 different reports, videos, infographics, and more on anything related to climate change adaptation in Atlantic Canada. Again, searchable with different filters by region, by issue, by language, publication date, the type of thing that you're looking for. And all of the resources on this have been reviewed by the team to ensure that they're accurate, and they fit the different categories for the filtering and that kind of thing. Yeah. Another page that we operate on our website is a funding opportunities page. So any type of funding streams that come out for anything related to climate adaptation in Canada, we try to get the word out about those things. Currently on our page, there's over 65 different funds listed, and we try to keep it regularly up to date on when they're open and accepting applications or not. And they're separated out on the page, like national, regional, provincial, Indigenous specific programs, for smaller community-based things or other non-traditional programs. And also when in the past, we've now hosted 4 different what we call idea exchanges, which are sessions to help aid collaboration for funding applications for people across Atlantic Canada to work together for really big funding calls that come out from the federal government for the most part. So for example, the Climate Resilient Coastal Communities program that NRCan put out last year, we did a call for that one. And I think that's the biggest one that we've had so far. We're also planning on a few more this fall, for one specifically targeted at municipalities through the Green Municipal Funds, Local Leadership for Climate Adaptation, Climate Resilient Plans and Processes call that will be coming out later this fall. Yeah, so you can keep your eye out for funding programs if you're looking to collaborate with other organizations on some bigger projects. And we try to keep folks up to date on that. Another tool that we have on our website that I want to plug is our Coastal Adaptation Toolkit. So it hosts 2 different online decision support tools. One that is designed specifically for Atlantic Canada communities, and one that's designed specifically for individual property owners. And these are help to inform adaptation options to help deal with coastal flooding and coastal erosion issues that communities and folks might be facing. So within the 2 tools, it leads you through a bunch of different questions kind of about like the different type of coastal environments, what type of community you're located in, whether there's already existing erosion or flooding issues, and kind of like what type of erosion or flooding and those kind of things. With helpful pictures on a lot of the questions to help you understand what we're trying to get at with the different types of environments and things like that. And at the end of the tool, it will list out anything from like 30 some engineering and nature-based approaches, and also on the communities-based tool, another like 30 some planning tools, and we'll order them based on which ones are most relevant for the answers that you gave on the tool. Also within the toolkit overall, there's 3 accompanying guidance documents that go with these 2 online tools that give a lot of background on all of the options that we present, both engineering and nature-based and planning, and just background on different types of coastal environments in Atlantic Canada, how climate change is impacting them, and how adaptation works in coastal environments. CLIMAtlantic also has a resources and reports page on our website that is all products that we ourselves have created, whereas the adaptation library that I presented earlier includes these things, but it includes lots of things that aren't resources that we created, of course, because we've only existed for a few years, so we have created only a few resources at this point. But one such is a climate information and data guidebook for Atlantic Canada that we released earlier this year. And that outlines kind of all the different types of climate data, different projection scenarios, like what's the difference between RCPs and SSPs, and where you can find different scenarios that you might be looking for. We also put out some other things like infographics that are related to adaptation in some different sectors, and two-page primers on extreme weather adaptation options for a few different types of extreme weather events. We also do a lot of communications and engagement. We have a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to. It's offered in both English and French or bilingually. You can subscribe right on our homepage of our website. And we're active on social media as well. So you can follow us if you don't already and are interested in that. It's just at CLIMAtlantic on all platforms. And finally, just a plug for something that is going to be coming up in the near future from CLIMAtlantic. If you are, or you know somebody who is sort of new to climate adaptation and are working in the sector or like starting to work in the sector, we're starting up a training program for adaptation professionals in Atlantic Canada. Registration will open in November, and the first cohort, so it's going to be a cohort-based program with 6 asynchronous modules and 3 virtual and 3 in-person synchronous training sessions. The cohorts will be 1 per province in English at first, and then there'll be a French cohort later on as well. The first cohort will start in January 2025 with registration opening in November. And it's a 12-week program. It's called CART, Climate Adaptation and Resilience Training. And yeah, could be for folks who work in mitigation, so want to learn more about adaptation, or work in sort of adaptation adjacent sectors, or are new graduates wanting to get into this more into the sector, or folks from municipalities who work on climate change a little tiny bit, and that kind of thing. So you can keep your eye out for this coming out soon. So yeah, that's the basics on CLIMAtlantic. I'm happy for you to contact me if you have any questions, or you can check out our website to contact some of my other colleagues if you're in other provinces. But yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Jenna. We do have some time for a couple of questions in case anyone has any questions to bring up to Jenna now.
Can you just elaborate on who specifically you're looking for the cohort for the CART course?
Yeah,
So yeah.
This is really, so it's a program it's for anybody in Atlantic Canada who has interest in learning more about climate adaptation. So I guess maybe if I like give a little bit more detail about the types of things that are going to be included in the learning for it, that might help. So the 6 modules, there's going to be one kind of like a whole background on climate change, so not purely adaptation. And kind of understanding all the different terminology, understanding projections and climate data and things like that. One all about vulnerability and risk and adaptation and like what those terms mean and how to better understand that. One all about communication, engagement, and facilitation within climate adaptation. One about relationship building and teamwork and networking, leadership. Another one all about navigating adaptation across different governance levels. So like municipal, indigenous communities, federal, provincial, kind of how it works across different levels. And the last one is about adaptation process management. So how to create an adaptation project, and kind of like different steps that you'd need to follow if, like, for example, you're sort of just delving into climate adaptation and you work for a municipality and you don't really know how to start on a project like that. So that's kind of the goal of this, is for folks who don't have a ton of background in climate adaptation but are starting to work in it and want to learn more. And it's really, we're hoping to create some more climate champions like you guys, but specifically around adaptation, I guess. To have a lot more people who are trained on adaptation in Atlantic Canada who can to grow the network of people who work on that. If that makes sense. I don't know if that really gives it, if that's actually a good answer on who it's for, but it's really for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, that was super
And yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and there will be cohorts in each province. And it'll be run multiple times. The first intake is just for intake in November to start in January. So it'll run January, February,
one
March.
cohort per province. How
One
many
cohort
people
per
were gonna
province.
be in the cohort? Because for some reason I'm like thinking that there was just gonna be like one, because you said it was a cohort model, and then I wrote one per province, and then I'm like, there's not gonna be just 4
No,
people. You're
probably like
delusional.
20, depending on interest. It could be, I think they're planning on around 20. Something like that.
So Shitangshu, I think that what she said was that it's 12 weeks. There's 6 asynchronous modules. Thank you. And then there is 3 virtual meetings and 3 in-person meetings. And then at the end of the year, there's like an all cohort shindig.
Yes.
I'd like to be part of the shindig, just saying.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Does anybody have any questions for Jenna?
Oh yeah. I'll go next if nobody else has one. No, that was really cool to hear, and we'll definitely be checking out those resources later. But as somebody who's new to Atlantic Canada, what kind of major climate-related risks do you deal with? Like, is it storms, floods, forest fires?
All of the above. It depends on, of course, where you're located. Like we have the coastal toolkit specifically for coastal communities because coastal flooding and erosion are some of the biggest risks that they might be worried about. Also have resources on extreme heat, wildfires, inland flooding as well. Like flooding along rivers is kind of one of the biggest ones at a provincial scale in New Brunswick, for instance, along the Woolastook St. John River, a lot of like the spring freshet flooding, and yeah, increasing heat overall, increasing wind from bigger storms, just like with increasing heat as climate changes overall, that allows there to be more water vapor in the air, so that can lead to bigger precipitation storms all at once. Like we've seen a lot of big rainstorms in the last while that have led to flash flooding and things like that in multiple of the Atlantic provinces. Potential for bigger hurricanes, so looking at Fiona and the potential for things like that in the future. Yeah, it's bleak to talk about it a lot, but that's why we try to create resources to help people understand how they're being impacted. And like I've given presentations with lots of different groups like emergency measures officials, firefighters, really anyone and everyone can be any way related to climate change, which we all know is such a big topic that's all encompassing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Thanks.
Jenna, if I can maybe I just add on, and I guess jump from Vikram's question there. I guess what are the gaps in terms of do you feel that we're prepared for the next Fiona? Do you feel like we reacted well? And I guess where do you feel that as a community the gaps are for us to be? It looks like we have to adapt, right? Like I mean, yes, mitigation is great, but like we are at a point, especially in Atlantic Canada, where we need to figure out that we need to live with climate change in many ways. So what is, I guess, where are the gaps that maybe people in the community can support in this broader objective?
I mean, unfortunately, there's both a lot of gaps and not necessarily a lot that aren't being addressed at the same time. Like different things like looking at coastal areas, like the fact that the Coastal Protection Act in Nova Scotia was canceled, and that there's not like sort of equivalent policies in all of the different provinces. So new construction can happen in risk areas, not only on the coast, but like along river floodplains and things like that. Yeah, the fact that there's not stronger policies to limit development in risk areas is a big issue. But then if you're building out in other areas, like it's really hard to adapt for both flooding and for wildfires and for different things all at the same time, because sometimes suggestions for different things might contradict each other. Like, hey, you want to plant vegetation around your house so that it will take in floodwaters and reduce your flooding risk, but you also want to cut trees and vegetation that are right next to your house to limit your wildfire risk. So I don't know. That's not maybe not a good example, but I think like some of the bigger societal gaps are in terms of policy, and just like understanding that a lot of societal issues right now, like access to housing and food and things, they're all related to climate change. And it's something that not a lot of people understand, and that like social justice issues, those who are already more impacted by generalized social justice issues are also those who are more impacted by climate change in general, and just providing more supports for people who need it. I don't think this is a very good answer to your question. I'm sorry, but yeah, there's a lot of gaps, but it's hard to pinpoint any particular. I don't know. It depends on where your passion is too. What ones you want to work on the most.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I didn't want to cut anyone off there on the questions, but we've slowly creeped in a little bit to our second section of the meeting for collaborative problem solving and kind of thinking of a challenge. And we've mentioned extreme weather events and potential brainstorming of solutions and next steps, although that's a big challenge to tackle as a small community, but
Great presentation too, Jenna. Very informative. Sometimes I'm shocked at the amount of things that CLIMAtlantic is doing, especially across such a broad region. It's really impressive. Yeah, for collaborative problem solving, like I think that like something we could talk about is, and something that like I think is a large issue that all of us working in climate is like engaging young people. Like you're talking about this CART leadership training. We're talking about making sure that people are informed. Of course, in New Brunswick, we have elections on Monday, so there's rampant misinformation happening. I figure like we have a good solid couple minutes to talk. How about we talk about maybe your idea for how to engage a younger generation and create, instead of siloed communities of just specific generations, intergenerational communities where we can share knowledge and prepare people to inherit the future, but also listen to young people when we're making decisions based on their future. I'm taking notes. Feel free to unmic yourself, by the way.
I think that maybe allowing a space for them in the adult conversations, whether it be like conferences or meetings or like organizations talking to each other, just like inviting them in and allowing, like giving them a space to have a voice, I think would really help include them in decision making.
As somebody who is young, when you come into these spaces, like what is, like I say that affectionately, but I recall obviously my own hesitations. For you, what is something that makes an adult space, as you described it, maybe not as welcoming or as inviting?
I think that there's a lot of events that have a fee associated with them, and so that like the fee of attending is definitely a big limiting factor in attending some of the more important meetings, and just like there isn't a whole lot of awareness of meetings. Like I haven't personally gone to any like counselor meetings or that sort of thing. But I know a lot of other youth who have done that, and I think that just like being like, hey, there's this thing that you can go to and you can share your opinion, or even just like going to I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is like a conference meeting, because I've been thinking about conferences. Um, and just being like, hey, you can go and like you can listen. And I think that even just educating youth about what's going on will let them like be able to make more informed decisions. And yeah, so the knowledge and the financial.
I think before I attempt to come up with solutions, I want to establish what you mean by young to begin with. So I don't consider myself young anymore.
I hate that whole youth category thing. It breaks my heart because youth is so like 18 to 30 post-secondary. I had kids when I was like 23 years old. Okay. So like I wasn't included in that youth category. I was just like canceled out. And now they do like the youth extension to 35, which I'm like okay with because like I'm still within that. But then I don't necessarily feel included in youth spaces because of this dichotomy. Like I feel like when it comes to like maybe lived experience, I might have a little too much, but at the same time, like I love being in youth spaces because they just check you when you need it. They are like profound knowledge givers. What do you guys feel about the youth bracket?
Yeah, for me, I feel like I haven't spoken to a young person ever since I left college. Like I used to have a lot of these discussions during my university days, but once you leave the college ecosystem, I feel like you're pretty much only interacting with the business world or the adult world. So yeah, I definitely feel like maybe it would be a good idea to have these conversations in universities or libraries and so on.
So here's one I just want to touch on real quick here. This came up in the news today about the Ontario court basically got a landmark case of climate change brought about by youths that are arguing that the weakened emissions target violates their Charter of Rights. So I just ran across this in the news, and you're talking about youth, and this one kind of struck my attention, so I just had to do a quick search on it. But yeah, it's cropped up. So the youth are paying attention, and let's face it, you're all youth to me. so, I mean, I think that Ashley's already heard the story, but I grew up in a household on the West Coast in the 60s, 70s. My dad was part of the anti-pollution society that existed back in the day. We were doing all this recycling and all this kind of thing. And I mean, back then, climate change wasn't even discussed. This one wasn't even a topic for discussion back then. Yet my parents were involved in it. And so ergo I was as well as a youth. And, I've carried that with me and I've tried to instill that in my family. And of course I do it through my work as well. But, we're all youngsters when it comes down to this one, because this is new.
And just like building on Bikram's point on like being in college and like talking to you during college, and totally understood your point there, Andrew, on like what's youth and like then what are the priorities that we have as youth right now and how we perceive the world. Maybe a little bit different as in other generations, but also like thinking on whether college was a good place because you're allowed to kind of ask more questions. And what I perceive right now, like being in this like working space and so on, is that some of the things are kind of assumed, and like kind of those are facts, and this is the knowledge, and this is what we're going to, and this is like part of what we're doing. But maybe it's just having the space to ask more, and like to being more curious about like, okay, you're telling me this is true for how long, and why, how come, and will it still be true for the next 10 years? Is it true for me? Is it just true for you within your own like sphere of like your environment? So just thinking out on like whether is the age bracket that generates this youth engagement, or is like more like having this space to ask more questions and like have these kind of safe slash brave space, and like asking questions that are people think they're taboo or to ask, or like they're too silly to ask because we already have an answer to that. Yeah, just building onto both points over there and how we think about youth.
I love that. That was really profound, piecing all that together, Nicole. It's like, is youth like a prescribed age bracket, or is youth the mentality and the consciousness of being able to critique and having room and space to critique, instead of this like indoctrination and overbearing status quo that we're like force fed? That was beautiful.
And
Thank
I
you for
was
that.
actually, sorry, Kira, you can go.
No, it's okay, you go ahead.
I was actually talking about this with some friends the other day, and it's completely irrelated, but we distinctively remember kind of just a time where we were more on the child side and just going through life having fun, and actually distinctively waking up one morning and go like, oh, there is a purpose to life, and I'm gonna ask these why questions to everything because I want to know the answer, and I want to get to kind of a core root answer or a core root of a problem, and I want to go why. And it was interesting to kind of hear. I thought back to myself and I was like, yeah, there was really one time where I woke up and I was like, I want to fight for the environment. I am passionate about this. And I can distinctively remember a time, not necessarily an exact day that I woke up, but a time where I was like, well, before that, I was just kind of just living life and not really asking and just recycling for the sake of recycling. And then one day really waking up and going, well, why do we recycle? Why is it this and that? Why should we compost, and et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great point. I just wanted to come back a little bit to the conversation about what is a youth. And I think that it comes into like between you and like the other person, like, and that kind of mentality of like questioning. And I think that's something that we can do, whether you are a youth or an adult or however you see yourself. Just like whenever you have conversations with people, go into that conversation like asking the other person if they have questions, or like asking questions that you have, and just creating a space and a dynamic where people can learn, and you can like, or if you feel like you've got more wisdom and a certain idea than the other person, then feel free to share that. And just like taking the taking formality back a step, and like really opening yourself up and having those kind of deeper conversations in whatever scenario you're in. Yeah.
If you think of that as the eternal lesson of life, the eternal teacher, right? Think of the 85-year-old monk in the monastery who looks at the 55-year-old monk as a youth, right? Who looks at them as their infancy and their growth, looks at them as like somebody who's on that quest for knowledge. So that's a really interesting dynamic to that perception as well. Like, is youth the relationship between two individuals or your self-perception?
On that note, I'm sure you might know, Ashley, is there like a mentorship sort of thing, like a green careers type thing going on in New Brunswick where people can be like paired up with university students, maybe answer questions? I don't know.
Okay, so in New Brunswick, there is something called the Gaia Project, and they have something called the Green Mentorship Program that directly connects youth and people who are working within sustainability. I used to actually be a communications director at the Gaia Project and can't say enough amazing things about all of the incredible work that they do. And then they are part of what's called the UCAN. It's essentially a membership of organizations across Atlantic Canada that all work in climate education. So there's STEAM PEI as well as the Clean Foundation that's in there. I can't remember who the Newfoundland Labrador partner is at this moment. But essentially, like, these organizations look at partnering people with others to understand more. But the problem is there's a lot of youth councils and there's a lot of youth initiatives, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to maybe some showmanship or tokenization or emptiness. I think that, like, mentorship should be focused in that relationship building and really kind of deepening the value system within people, not necessarily just equating it to, you know, a transfer of knowledge. Yeah, so I think that this is obviously something that we could grow and start within our own community if people are interested in it. But I also know I'm part of Climate Reality Project Canada, and we have a group across the country of about 1,600 what we call climate reality leaders who also participate in mentorship programs as well. So when it comes down to it, if there is somebody that is looking for a little more guidance, there is opportunity and people that want to facilitate that connection. But always the catch-22 is the awareness of this, right? If people don't know it's there, then they're never going to actually access it. So unless we start being able to directly speak to people that are in that, you know, cart phase of their career, if you will, Jenna, then I think that, like, that's when we're going to see more traction and more people feeling empowered within their voice. Because I know it took me a very long time to feel like I was comfortable talking about the values that I had or the opinions that I had without, like, the backlash. And, like, when you're young, you're yearning for social acceptance. So it becomes more difficult and layered. So when we broaden that opportunity for youth to be centered and really legitimize their opinions, I think that's when we'll see a lot of amazing things happen in climate and community building, really. Kira, did you want to mention something?
Yeah, so I joined this mentor type thing through my university, Trent, and it's called 10,000 Coffees, and they pair you with an alumni and you select certain categories that you're interested in, and then you get paired with them and you can message each other on this app. But, like, I found that I don't there have maybe been like one or two mentors that have reached out to me, and I've only reached out to 5 or 6 mentors because it feels like a lot of work, and what they do doesn't necessarily sound super interesting to me. But I feel like I have made a lot more kind of mentorship relationships through just like LinkedIn. Oh, that person sounds cool. I should message them. Or like I run into somebody in a meeting like this, and then I schedule a meeting with that person and I develop that relationship and I continue to uphold and keep in contact with that person. So I feel like with mentorship programs, there really needs to be that initiative and that interest from both parties. And just because you sign up for something like that doesn't mean you necessarily have the capacity to do that. So maybe just encouraging people to form mentorship type relationships in their day-to-day lives, in their networking meetings when they meet somebody, and like really following up with people as opposed to reaching out once, because that's when you get the valuable stuff. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about all of that stuff. And I think it's just a lot of
Showmanship
really putting in
sometimes.
the work in, like putting the work in to form those relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's really great reflection. Shutang.
Yes. So actually, I wanted to say thank you first for creating the space to asking this question. I also, like you, I'm when you're on the older side of 30 now. You're like, I'm no longer youth, but am I youth? I don't know. And then it's like I also I'm very fortunate to also be in positions where I'm sometimes being able to provide maybe the mentorship or being on the other side. I do think, like, to what some other folks have said as well, I think there is, and I'm seeing this more when you're in the middle spot, like more that adults, I don't even know that's the right word, need to do to incorporate youth into their decision making, but also the other way around. I see a lot of like, these are the youth ideas, and these are this stuff, and there's like this separation, and I feel like that needs to be challenged at some level, and it needs to go both ways. I think one thing which is important to, like, my culture in Bangladesh, is important indigenous culture, is the importance of the elder and the knowledge that, like, Andrew, you mentioned that your dad was in the environmental stewardship movement well before my time, and so there's a real question. If you're a young person, we have so much to learn from everyone who's been in this fight before us, and equally when we are young people, or when you are young people, you're seeing the world in a different perspective, and there's ideas that you're seeing, and there's different priorities that you're seeing, that ultimately this matters more to you than it matters to someone who has less life to live, so to speak, right? And so I think there is a different level of investment. So I feel like there's needs to be at some level more bringing togethering of like these different groups, and at the same time also having spaces where everyone's got their spaces, but then also how do we bring that together? So I think like that's maybe one reflection. I also really like your note that there is a lot of good work that is out there, and one thing that's obsessed, I think we've talked about this, Ashley, as well. Whether you look at Atlantic Canada, the climate movement, you get the Halifax, and what is the inspiration of the HRM ecosystem map. We've been also thinking at the Oath Project about the fact that there's a lot of youth-serving climate organizations who run a lot of incredible programs. But how do we create awareness of the multitude of programs that are happening, so that a young person, when they're in that space, knows where to go next? So I'm fortunate to be part of the team at the Youth Impact Challenge. There, what we see from our youth who finish our programs is they always ask me, the consistent thing is, what do we do next? Where do we go next? Because we can only help them to a certain point, and then there's a level of support that it's about pointing them to various programs. So I think like there is a question of how do we create a better sense of where the opportunities are for people. It's also sad that Mill's not here, but I also want to give a shout out to the work that the Climate Futures Lab had done in terms of also giving youth those spaces where they can catalyze their idea and catalyze their ideas and the like. And I think that kind of program where people like the Youth Impact Challenge, like Climate Futures Lab, like the Climate Change Makers Challenge, which both had a leadership role in, I think those are important in terms of also just giving people, saying that, hey, we want you to be the innovators, we want you to share what your ideas are, and let's connect you with your relevant networks to do that. So I do think there's a lot of opportunity, but it all starts with us asking the question you that Ashley, how can we better incorporate? Kira and I were having like a 2-hour conversation about this like a week ago. So
right. And how do you make it so that it doesn't feel extractive as well? Like, how do you make it so it doesn't feel like we're just setting up a bunch of youth to steal all of their ideas in an Elon Musk style harvest and just like appropriating them into the world, right? Like there's also this idea of like intellectual property and encouraging people and fulfilling people in a deep way through validation. I do want to note though that we are over time because we are having such a fantastic conversation, but I do need to kind of go over some of the ideas on what we're going to do for next month. So Amanda, did you want to do that or do you want me to do that? It's up to you.
Sure, I was just glancing at it. For next month, our topic is going to be honoring Indigenous knowledge and leadership, and we are looking for suggestions from the group on a potential Indigenous climate leader to be our speaker. We've got some in the chat rolling in. And our focus for next month is also going to be learning about Indigenous perspectives on climate change, traditional knowledge, ecological knowledge, and opportunities for collaboration, and exploring ways to incorporate Indigenous knowledge. And there is some great resources as well that do mentorship with, it's through the Outdoor Learning School and Store. They have quite a wide reach across Canada. And I forget what we were talking about earlier today that made me think of that in this meeting.
They just launched that mentorship program. That's why. So they're
Yeah.
they're just talking about this and accepting both mentors and mentorees to partner to be able to facilitate more of that transformation of outdoor education knowledge and experience. I think that's what you're talking about. I was just reading it this morning.
Would somebody mind putting that link or what Google search to use to find that?
Yeah, I've got their general, oh, Vikram got it first, website, and I can find the email I got that was the specific mentorship email, because I believe they partnered with Take Me Outside for that one.
Afraid I'm gonna have to drop off. I gotta join another meeting, but thank you again. Really got a lot. It's great. Good seeing you guys.
You too.
Hey, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Here, I have the online version of the newsletter right here too. Oh, look, you just did the same thing. We're so good at this. Well, wonderful. I think we have Rebecca Thomas as a suggestion. If there's any other Indigenous speakers that you would like to bring forth and suggest, we would really love to facilitate that. Within that, we do have an honorarium for Indigenous speakers as well. So don't let that hesitation stop you from suggesting somebody. I'll continue to write these suggestions as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, need to head out, but that was great. Nice meeting you guys.
Oh, 1 second before everybody goes, on Monday, we have our next innovation speaker series. It's going to be with Aslan Renewables. You guys aren't going to want to miss this. What they're doing is they're taking these defunct old sites that were essentially old like mills or old things that were powered by water generation, and they're putting in these small scale water generation for community power and sovereignty. It's really cool. You guys are going to want to, and if you guys are ever interested, we do have our Green Ink book club as well. In December, we have the author coming to join us. That's Osprey O'Reilly Lake. We're reading The Story Is in Our Bones. We're covering the first section of the book on Monday, the first 115 pages. If anybody is interested in joining that, there are some opportunities for more engagement. And if not, I hope to see you all next month for our next meeting. Thank you all for joining. It was so much gratitude. I wish you a wonderful day.